I said over my dead body, I have banned all the export of unprocessed minerals from here. Let them stay in the ground. When the grandchildren come, they will get them out.
These aren't the words of a revolutionary hiding in the mountains or a theorist scribbling in a book. These are the words of a sitting head of state, President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. And it wasn't just a fiery speech. It was a policy announcement that sent tremors through the global economic order. This isn't just a story about export regulations. It's the story of a political earthquake. In mid-August 2025, Uganda officially drew a line in the sand, enforcing a sweeping ban on the export of its unprocessed minerals, from gold and tin to its vast iron ore reserves. It's a direct challenge to a system that's been in place for centuries. A system that has watched Africa's immense natural wealth get dug up, shipped thousands of miles away, and turned into unimaginable profit for pretty much everyone except Africa itself. President Museveni calls this an end to the economic hemorrhage. In doing so, he has set his nation on a collision course with some of the most powerful economic forces on the planet. This is the story of his high-stakes gamble to reshape not just Uganda's future, but potentially the future of an entire continent. It's a declaration of economic war, and the world is now being forced to choose a side. To really get the scale of what's happening in Uganda, you first have to understand the trap. It's a trap that was set over a century ago, not with chains, but with contracts and railway lines. It's a system so baked into the global economy that most of us don't even see it. But for African nations, it's a daily reality. Let's use a simple, powerful example that might be in your kitchen right now: coffee. Uganda is one of Africa's coffee giants. Millions of Ugandan farmers work under the sun, growing some of the finest beans in the world. They pour their lives into the soil. When the harvest is ready, they sell their raw green coffee beans. For a kilogram of those beans, they might get about $2.50. Let that sink in. $2.50 for a kilogram of their labor, their land, their heritage. But the story of that coffee bean is far from over. It's packed into sacks, loaded onto ships, and sent on a long journey to Europe or North America. There, it enters a totally different world of gleaning factories and slick marketing teams. The bean is roasted, a process that instantly multiplies its value. Then it's ground, packaged into a glossy, vacuum-sealed bag with a fancy logo, and placed on a supermarket shelf in New York, London, or Berlin. That same kilogram of coffee that left Uganda for a couple of bucks. It's now sold to you, the consumer, for upwards of $40. So who pocketed that extra $37.50? Not the farmer. Not the Ugandan government. The value was added thousands of miles away. The jobs in roasting, grinding, packaging, marketing, logistics, retail were all created somewhere else. The profits fattened the balance sheets of multinational corporations. All Uganda did was provide the raw ingredient. It was the starting line of the race, but it was never allowed to run to the finish. This wasn't an accident. It was the design. A colonial-era blueprint that was never thrown away. The railways built by the British in Uganda weren't designed to connect Ugandan towns to each other to build a domestic economy. They were designed to connect the resource-rich interior to the ports, to get the raw materials out as fast and as cheap as possible. That fundamental pattern is still alive and well in the 21st century. Now, apply that same logic to what the president's ban is about: minerals. Uganda is sitting on a treasure trove of mineral wealth, including an estimated 312 million tons of high-quality iron ore. For years, the model was to export this ore in its raw, unprocessed state. A ton of this high-grade hematite ore would sell for about $47 on the world market. But once you process that same ton into steel, its value explodes to over $600. That's more than a 12-fold increase. Who gets that money? Who gets the high-paying jobs in the steel mills? Historically, not Uganda. President Museveni has called this system a curse and modern slavery. He argues pretty bluntly that when you export raw materials, you are exporting jobs. You're exporting opportunity. You are exporting the very chance to industrialize. You're locking your nation into being a permanent supplier, never a creator, a perpetual source of cheap parts for other nations' prosperity. This is the economic hemorrhage he's talking about. A slow, silent bleeding of wealth, potential, and dignity that has plagued the continent for generations. For decades, the world has spoken of trade with Africa. But for many on the continent, it's felt less like trade and more like a sophisticated, systemic looting. A game where the rules were written by the guys who already owned the casino. So what happens when a nation tries to break free from this trap? What happens when they decide they want to roast their own coffee or smelt their own steel? The system, the very architecture of global trade, starts to push back. This is the agitation phase, where the consequences of this lopsided model become painfully, infuriatingly clear. The agitation isn't just about lost money. It's about the deliberate, structural hurdles put in the path of any African nation that tries to climb the ladder. For years, development banks have preached the gospel of adding value to products. So what happens when a country like Uganda actually does it? Imagine they pull off a monumental achievement, getting their own roasted, processed, espresso-grade coffee directly onto the shelves of American or European stores. This isn't just selling a product, it's selling a brand. It's capturing a bigger slice of that $40 pie. It's a small but powerful win in the fight for economic independence. And what's the typical response from the markets they're trying to enter? Instead of a welcome mat, they often hit a wall. While raw, green coffee beans might get a relatively easy pass, the moment a finished product appears that could compete with established brands, it can face higher tariffs and trade barriers. It's a classic move called tariff escalation, and it's designed to protect established industries in wealthy nations and gently nudge developing countries back into their box as simple raw material suppliers. It's a game of heads I win, tails you lose. Export your raw materials cheap, and we profit. Try to process them yourself and compete with us, and we'll penalize you until you can't afford to play. This goes way beyond tariffs. It's about getting money. A local bank might happily give a farmer a short-term loan to export his raw crop. That's a simple, low-risk deal. But that same bank will think twice about giving the massive long-term loan needed to build a modern processing plant. It's riskier, it's more complex, and the global financial system isn't really built to support that kind of project in developing nations without major incentives. The consequences are devastating. Economically, it means stunted growth. National budgets are stuck on the roller coaster of raw commodity prices, which are decided in markets in London and New York. A sudden dip in gold prices can throw an entire nation's finances into chaos. Socially, it means a catastrophic lack of good jobs for a young, booming population. The real job creation happens in the factories, the processing plants, the marketing agencies, all located abroad. This fuels unemployment, poverty, and social instability, forcing millions of Africa's brightest young people to look for opportunities elsewhere. A tragic brain drain of the very minds needed to build the continent's future. This is the pressure cooker that President Museveni and other African leaders find themselves in. They see their country's wealth being siphoned away. They see their people's potential being wasted. And when they try to change the game, they hit a wall of tariffs, financial blockades, and systemic pushback. It's from this fire of frustration that President Museveni's dead body declaration was born. It wasn't a reckless outburst. It was a calculated response to a system that, in his eyes, had left him and his country no other choice. The battle for Africa's economic soul is happening right now. This isn't just a news story. It's a turning point in modern history. If you believe nations deserve the right to control their own resources and build their own futures, then support this channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Share this video to get the word out about this economic war. The world needs to know the real story behind the headlines. Now, let's get back to how Uganda is planning to fight back. Faced with a system he saw as a dead end, President Yoweri Museveni made a move of breathtaking defiance. He didn't just file a complaint with the World Trade Organization. He flipped the entire chessboard. His mid-August 2025 directive, issued under the stark title "No to Economic Hemorrhage," laid out a policy that was simple and absolute: a complete ban on the export of all unprocessed minerals. This is the solution, as Museveni sees it. It's not a negotiation, it's economic shock therapy. The logic is brutally direct. If the world won't let Uganda compete with its finished goods, then it will get none of its raw materials. The flow of cheap inputs is being cut off at the source. The goal is to force the value-adding jobs and factories to come to Uganda, whether foreign partners like it or not. Let's be clear about the scale of this. The ban covers Uganda's most critical mineral exports. We're talking about its high-grade iron ore, gold, tin, wolfram, and vermiculite, to name a few. Museveni's message to international mining companies was blunt. If you cannot process minerals from Uganda, leave them alone. Let them stay in the ground. It's a direct assault on the century-old business model of multinational mining giants that have profited by digging up Africa's wealth and processing it somewhere else. This isn't just protectionism. It's a strategy of forced industrialization. The government is scrambling to put the pieces in place to make it work. They're offering incentives like tax breaks on imported machinery and ordering the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development to deny export licenses to any company not processing minerals inside the country. This ban has real teeth. We're already seeing the first signs of this strategy in action. In the city of Jinja, the Abyssinia Steel Factory is up and running. It's a plant designed specifically to use Uganda's own iron ore to produce 75,000 tons of steel every year, creating hundreds of direct jobs and over 1,000 indirect ones. This is the vision made real: Ugandan ore, processed by Ugandan workers, in a Ugandan factory, to build Uganda's future. The economic logic is powerful. Take the mineral vermiculite. A ton of raw, unprocessed vermiculite sells for a measly $25. But after being processed in Uganda, that same ton can sell for up to $410. That's a staggering 16-fold increase in value. Or consider gold. By refining it locally at new facilities, like the Chinese-backed Wagagai Gold Refinery, Uganda can earn more than double the value per kilogram compared to exporting it unrefined. Multiply that kind of difference across millions of tons of resources, and you see the colossal potential that's been lost for generations. But this grand plan is also a monumental gamble, loaded with risk. First, there's the immediate economic shock. Cutting off your main source of export revenue, even if it's undervalued, is going to hurt. It can lead to foreign exchange shortages and scare markets. Second is the capital. Building factories and refineries costs a fortune. Can Uganda fund this industrial revolution on its own? Or will it need foreign investors to come in, knowing they're being forced into a new, less profitable model? Museveni is betting that the sheer quality and quantity of Uganda's resources will leave them no choice. The third and most dangerous risk is geopolitical backlash. This ban is a direct shot at powerful global interests. Western nations and multinational corporations won't just sit by as their access to cheap raw materials is cut off. The risk of punitive tariffs, trade sanctions, and diplomatic heat is very real. Uganda is stepping onto the world stage and challenging giants. President Museveni is betting his nation's future on its ability to take the hit. He's essentially telling the world, "We are done being your mine and your farm. We will be our own factory." Uganda is walking away from a rigged game, intending to build its own. The question is whether this bold act of defiance will spark an economic renaissance or plunge the nation into isolation. President Museveni's declaration of economic war wasn't made in a vacuum. What's happening in Uganda isn't some isolated event. It is the loudest and clearest sign of a powerful current sweeping across the African continent. The trend of resource nationalism. Across Africa, from the Sahel to its southern tip, a new generation of leaders and citizens is asking the same basic question. Why is our continent, with a third of the world's mineral reserves, still home to the world's poorest people? The answer, many have decided, is the exact exploitative economic model that Museveni is trying to tear down. And they're starting to fight back. Just look at Zimbabwe. It banned the export of raw lithium, a mineral that's absolutely critical for the batteries powering the global green energy transition. The government in Harare has ordered that value must be added locally, forcing companies to build processing plants inside the country. Look to West Africa, where new governments in countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are tearing up and rewriting their mining codes. They are demanding a bigger piece of the pie, more state ownership in mines, and a stronger voice in how their own natural wealth is managed. This is a continent-wide awakening. Since 2014, at least 31 African countries have reformed their mining laws to get more control and a better deal. The common goal is what experts call local beneficiation, a fancy term for exactly what Museveni is demanding. Process your stuff at home before you sell it. Uganda's move is a game changer because it's the most aggressive and comprehensive version of this strategy yet. By taking on the entire mining sector at once, Museveni has set a powerful new precedent. You can bet other African leaders are watching very, very closely. If Uganda can pull this off, if it can survive the backlash and start building a real industrial economy, it could become the blueprint for the rest of the continent. It could turn this rising tide of resource nationalism into a tidal wave. This has huge implications for the rest of us. Global supply chains, built for a century on the bedrock assumption of endless cheap African raw materials, are now facing a level of uncertainty they've never seen before. The cost of everything from your smartphone to your electric car is tied to these resources. The world's economic superpowers are being forced to react. The European Union, terrified of its reliance on single sources for critical minerals, has launched a raw materials initiative and is scrambling to sign new strategic partnerships with African nations. They're now using words like co-investment and local value addition. But is this a genuine change of heart, or just a new strategy to secure resources in a world where they're losing control? Uganda's gamble has dragged these uncomfortable questions out into the light. It challenges the very foundation of the economic relationship between the global North and South. It's a statement that Africa will no longer be a passive supplier in the global economy. It's demanding to be a player, a partner, and a competitor. The ripples from Museveni's decision are spreading far beyond Uganda. He may have lit a spark, and the world is now holding its breath to see if it catches fire. What we are witnessing is more than a trade dispute. It's a historic reckoning. President Yoweri Museveni's defiant cry, "Over my dead body will raw materials leave Africa," is the explosive climax of decades of frustration with the global economic system that many on the continent feel was built to keep them down. This story is driven by a simple, powerful idea. The hand that mines the ore should be the one that forges the steel. The nation that holds the wealth beneath its soil should be the one to profit from it. The country that has been bleeding its potential should be the one to stop the hemorrhage. By banning the export of its unprocessed minerals, Uganda has started a dangerous but potentially world-changing journey. It's a high-stakes showdown, pitting a developing nation's ambition against the deeply entrenched interests of global superpowers. The road ahead is filled with risk. Economic isolation and geopolitical pressure are not just possible, they're probable. Powerful forces will absolutely push back against this disruption to the old way of doing things. But the potential prize is even bigger. A future where Uganda, and maybe all of Africa, finally breaks the raw material curse. A future of homegrown factories, of real jobs for its young people, of capturing the true value of its own incredible wealth. A future where Africa isn't just a quarry for the world, but a workshop for it. The Ugandan experiment is a litmus test for the 21st century. Will the world make room for a newly industrialized Africa? Or will it fight to protect a system that has served it so well for so long? The line has been drawn in the red soil of Uganda, and the future of global trade could be decided by what happens next.